Hi everyone, and welcome to video number 21 on USA conflict 54 to 75. And this video, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be looking at the tactics of the Vietcong, the communists, during the Vietnam War. Now, if you remember in the previous video, we were looking at how the conflict had escalated under President Johnson over in America. So, after the Gulf of Tonkin incident, we've seen that Johnson had decided to escalate the conflict. So now the Vietcong, that's the group of communist fighters, they were now facing the most powerful nation on the planet, the richest nation on the planet. And America, of course, had the most powerful weapons. Yes, the Vietcong did get help from Communist China and Communist USSR, but they were facing the US Army and the South Vietnamese Army, the ARVN. They were outgunned militarily. They only had about 170,000 troops. So what tactics could they possibly adopt? What could they try to do to beat the most powerful nation on earth? How could they win? Ladies and gentlemen, that's what this video is hopefully going to show you. They quickly realized that traditional fighting, traditional tactics, set battles would not work. They would be destroyed. They would have no chance. So they needed something else. They needed to come up with different tactics. What did they do? Well, the first thing they did, wear a monkey mask. No, that's not what they did. But a friend, of course, a relative of the monkey, we have the gorilla. So, no more monkey business. Let's get rid of that. Now, we're not talking about monkeys. We're not talking about gorilla. We are talking about the word guerrilla. Guerrilla tactics. Guerrilla warfare. What do we mean by guerrilla tactics? What was guerrilla warfare? Well, one of the leaders of the communists, a man called Ho Chi Minh. Remember the trail, the Ho Chi Minh Trail? I'll come back to that later in this video. Ho Chi Minh had seen these types of tactics, seen guerrilla tactics work against Japan and against France in earlier conflicts, trouble in Vietnam. What were they? What were guerrilla tactics? Well, it's a very simple idea, ladies and gentlemen. Let's have a look at it in 4 simple steps. Number 1, if the enemy attacks, you retreat, you run away. If the enemy makes camp, you raid them. If the enemy begins to tire, you attack them. And finally, if the enemy begins to retreat, you follow them and harry them and hassle them at every opportunity. That, in a nutshell, was the Vietcong tactics, guerrilla warfare. Now, if that type of fighting is going to succeed, ladies and gentlemen, you had to get the support of local people. You had to have them on your side. The Vietcong used different strategies to get the people of Vietnam on their side. First of all, they attacked the very unpopular, seen as corrupt government officials from South Vietnam. Many of the Vietcong actually lived alongside the normal civilians in their villages. It gave them the chance to put their ideas forward, propaganda talks in the villages. So they are trying to persuade. As well as that, on the other side, if necessary, the Vietcong would be ruthless and they would attack civilians if necessary. I'll talk about that later in the video. So, guerrilla tactics. Let's go back to my board. Guerrilla tactics. Well, 3 words will sum up guerrilla tactics. There they are, ladies and gentlemen. Hit and run. That's guerrilla tactics in a nutshell. There's the enemy. Here's you. They're far too big to go and stand up right against them in a normal fight. You cannot do that. They will win. You will lose. So you employ hit and run tactics. Bang! You attack them quickly and then run away before they are ready to fight. Hit and run tactics. That's what the Vietcong tactics were all about in the Vietnam War. Now, to help you remember what they actually did, let's go back to the board. Hit and run. Well, let's have a look at the hit. Hide in tunnels. The Vietcong used a tunnel network, even right down near Saigon, down in South Vietnam. They had hundreds of kilometers of tunnels dug, and they would hide in there, safe from US bombing. They would also booby trap the tunnels, so that if the Americans or the ARVN came across them, the tunnels would be used and they could counterattack. They could booby trap and attack the enemy. Now, most of the Vietnamese people were far smaller than the American soldiers, so the Vietcong could actually move inside the tunnels, whereas the bigger, bulkier American soldiers found it far more difficult and would often get stuck. The tunnels were used for supplies, for stores. They were very, very effective, and it quickly brought about in the Americans a fear. They hated to have to go into these tunnels, and in the end they wouldn't. They just bulldoze over the top of them because of the booby traps. It's been worked out, ladies and gentlemen, that 11% of American deaths in Vietnam were caused by the booby traps. So hiding in tunnels and then attacking and then running away quickly, hit and run, bang, run away. Tunnels were very effective. Hit, hide in tunnels. But what about the and? Let's have a look, ladies and gentlemen. Ambushes, not much direct fighting. And, A-N-D. Ambushes. Attack quickly, as I've suggested. Carrying light weapons, nothing to slow you down. It was all about speed and surprise, ladies and gentlemen. Attack quickly, ambush the enemy, and then run away quickly. Get back into the safety of the jungle. Get back to the safety of the tunnels. Of course, the Vietcong had the local knowledge, so they knew what they were doing. They would dig traps, pits, so that if the Americans followed, they would fall into them. Often they had sharp bamboo poles. They had tripwires which would trigger these, and they caused quite extensive damage to the American soldiers. Ambushes. Not much direct fighting. There were occasionally major battles. One was at, for example, at Ap-Bac, A-P-B-A-C. Now, because the Vietcong did not use normal direct fighting set battles very often, when they did, they had the surprise, they had shock factor, and sometimes they would do quite well. But most of the time, they avoided set piece battles. They avoided direct fighting. Hit and, the final word, run. Let's have a look. R-U-N. Raids, uniforms not worn. Well, let's have a look at the raids. Often, remember raiding, hit and run, moving quickly, attacking, getting away quickly, sabotage, attacking bridges, attacking roads, attacking a troop of American soldiers or ARVN, raiding and then retreating quickly, moving away. They didn't really wear uniforms. Well, look, if I put on a soldier's hat, soldier's helmet, whether it's that one or whether it's that one, you would say, oh, look at him. He is a soldier. He is my enemy. He's wearing a military uniform. But ladies and gentlemen, the Vietcong didn't do that. Now then, I'm not a soldier now. What am I? I work in an office. I'm a lawyer. I'm an accountant. Whatever. But deep down, I'm still a soldier. It's just that I'm not advertising the fact. I'm not wearing my uniform. I am blending in as a civilian, ladies and gentlemen. Many of the Vietcong, they didn't wear their uniform so they could attack, but then act like civilians. And remember, many of the civilians were on their side, so they would help them. They would allow them to blend in with them. They had their support. They wouldn't betray them, say, oh, it's him. Not wearing a uniform gave the Vietcong an advantage. It's almost as if they are a secret army, ladies and gentlemen. So one last time, the Vietcong guerrilla war, guerrilla tactics, hit and run. Reminds me of a fantastic song, favourite song of mine, from 1979, a man called Elvis Costello. Accidents will happen, we only hit and run. Now, hit and run on the roads is a crime. If you hit someone, you're supposed to stay and sort it all out with the police. But sometimes people drive away. Hit and run, it's called. Very, very bad on the roads. But as regards warfare, hit and run for the Vietcong was very, very successful. It's an effective way of fighting if your enemy, in this case the Americans, are far more powerful. Earlier in the video I said how the Vietcong got most of the locals, most of them on their side. They got support. And I talked about persuading them. And that's true. At the same time, they were ruthless. If necessary, they would attack the locals. And they would kill civilians if they thought they were cooperating with the Americans. Between 1966 and 1971, the Vietcong killed almost 30,000 people who worked for the South Vietnam government, whether they are police, tax collectors, teachers, etc. So they could be ruthless. That, of course, meant that many people would not betray them because they feared them. Equally, many of them would not betray them because they were on their side. They had been persuaded that fighting against America was the right thing to do. So the Vietcong ended up with a lot of local support, helping them follow their hit and run tactics, their guerrilla warfare. So, remember I mentioned earlier about the leader, Ho Chi Minh. And I mentioned the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Help from North Korea, from China, coming down through Laos, Cambodia, all the way down. Supplies were brought down by civilians. And if the Americans tried to bomb Ho Chi Minh Trail, the civilians would rebuild it, allowing the fighters, often hiding in tunnels, remember, to be supplied by the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The civilians, many of whom support the Vietcong, were doing important work, helping with the supply routes. That was essential. So, here I am. I'm a Vietcong fighter, even though I don't look like one. I'm using hit and run tactics. They could be potentially very, very successful, very effective. So that leads us to a question, ladies and gentlemen. What's America going to do about this? They're the most powerful nation on the planet. Are they going to allow some people, a mere 170,000, to push them around? What do you think? Well, what America did is coming in the next video. What were their tactics? How would they react to guerrilla warfare, hit and run? So that's coming next. This one has all been about the Vietcong. Let's see what the Americans did. As ever, I hope it's been useful. All the best now. Speak to you soon.